You're alive.
Hello, Twitter. Hello, YouTube. Just went live all simultaneously. We'll get this right one of these days. Welcome to episode 12, 12 plus of Swampside Chats. The reason we number it that way is we had started Swampside Chats in January, I believe, February. And then the pandemic hit with the quarantine, which interrupted, and then we restarted the count after that. Little insider trivia information for those who've been following our campaign since we started, actually back in December. So good evening. It's August something, and my name is Rob Anderson, and I'm running for Congress. I don't know what day it is, but person, woman, man, camera, TV. So tonight we've augmented our Swampside Chats a little bit. We have a unidirectional mic now, so you should be able to hear in the background giggling there. That was Ash.
Hi.
Check in, say hi.
Hey.
And everybody out there, anybody out there, if you could let me know if you could hear, make sure I have the what?
You didn't introduce Dave.
Well, I haven't introduced Dave yet, but I was getting that.
It's fine, Rob. It's fine.
And that, of course, is Dave. Claire is working on a project for us, so she's not here tonight. It's me, Dave, and Ash. We're going to hopefully bring you some information and updates on where the campaign is. Our campaign to replace Clay Higgins in the U.S. House of Representatives in the election that is on November 3rd of this year. So that's what we're here for. So yeah, that is Dave. That is Ash. Can everybody hear him? That was the question. Has anybody answered that yet?
Not that I can see yet.
Well, you all each have laptops open. Can you hear yourselves? Is there a
We
feedback loop?
We have our sounds turned off.
Yeah,
Well, you should probably turn it on so we can check. I
I
want to make sure I have the Omni mic on the one that they can hear me.
Por favor.
Yes.
Everyone prepare for feedback.
Feedback loop.
We have
sound.
We
Okay,
have
you can turn it
sound.
on. All right. We are getting better at this, but we're still introducing new elements every week. Obviously, we do high def TV now, and now we have an omnidirectional mic, and we're doing YouTube and Twitter live at the same time. It's almost like it's 2020. All these new technological toys. And that's it. Thank you for coming to our show. Good night. No. That was an example of what we call my dry humor, dad jokes, as my daughter would tell me, for good reason, because I'm her dad.
That's fair.
It
To the
is.
rest of us, they're just bad jokes.
Bad jokes. That was Ash, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, we keep her
The peanut
around.
gallery.
Yeah, so we haven't gotten any questions in live yet. Obviously, there's a lot of national news today, local news. We are still struggling here in Louisiana with COVID-19. It is a very real issue. There have been reports that our hospital ICUs are filled up, but the incumbent doesn't believe that. He believes it's conspiracy theory, and I think this battle between truth and fake news, and whichever either of those designation means, what's happening in the real world no longer gets translated. It gets spun. Everything is partisan spin. People just want to know what the actual danger is. Remember, they can hear you cough now. That would be Dave.
Sorry.
Stop breathing.
Yeah. Hold your breath for the next 45 minutes and go. So yeah, we're continuing to work that. Thank goodness our governor, John Bell Edwards, has been reactive the entire time. Critics of John Bell's point out the economic impacts more than the health impacts. We have reacted well to trying to isolate and encourage people to wear masks and distance and wash their hands. Failing spectacularly, but at least we're trying. That's not, I can't make jokes about that. That's why that fell flat, because it's just not funny right now.
Too soon.
Too soon. It's still happening. My own daughter recovered 2 months ago from COVID-19, but it was a bad 2 weeks for her. So this is real. And we're working through it. We're trying to work through it together. Anyway, as I was saying, John Bell's critics criticize him mostly for shutting down businesses and, especially bars and I don't think they did it. I don't know the legalities of it. Neither does anybody else, which is why there's a lawsuit to establish. We don't get a world attacking pandemic, but every 100 years or so. So the rules of this we kind of make up as we go along. We do have a question. Okay. So there is a lawsuit right now against the governor's orders of closing certain businesses and not others, and essential personnel. And it is going to have to be worked out in the courts, because all we're trying to do is protect each other. But people will think that businesses should have the right to decide whether or not they're open and take measures. It's that age-old regulation versus free market argument. And I think we have to prioritize public health. That's my stance on it, and we'll see what the courts decide. As Ash just pointed out, please feel free to ask all your burning questions, which, since we've been doing this regularly, I think people are starting to get to know our platforms and what we're doing. So, but we do have a question from Susan. As parents are facing the choice of going back to school or web schooling where available, I will note that with an asterisk, should the federal government fund an initiative to bring internet to rural areas to support the web option? Yes, absolutely. And I think that should be part of the recovery packages. Instead of $1.5 trillion or $1.5 billion, I forget what it was, for the new FBI, $1.7 billion for the new FBI building. Maybe we could hold off on that right now, and they can make do with the historic building they're currently in DC. And let's make sure everybody in the United States has access to high-speed internet. And I do think that's an infrastructure initiative. Obviously, it's been part of our platform from the beginning, but now we're starting to see nationwide. In some areas, they are pressuring to go back to school. One, parents have jobs, and daycare is not affordable across the country. So a lot of people do have that issue with their children. The web schooling or homeschooling isn't an option, because there's nobody with the children, especially young children. But it's not even an option if you don't have high-speed internet or, even an iPad or a computer. Let's get back to that. I mean, a lot of us have been poor, fortunate right now to have a laptop, but not everybody does, and we have to acknowledge that. And you can't just school some kids and not others. So we feel that pushing the way they are right now, without taking into account individual school districts, punishes the lower economic people on the lower economic end, poor people. It's we want every kid to go to school. Everybody should have high-speed internet, should have a tablet they get through classes. It's been tried in many districts, especially wealthier districts, because they can afford, but I think it should be a level playing field. Kids in the least well-funded school districts in our state or in the country should have the same access. Yes. That was my very long and boring way of saying yes. Politics, not for everybody. Don't try this at home.
Well.
Well, considering we broadcast weekly from Dave Longley's home, when I say don't try it at home, I mean you don't try it at home.
Leave it to the professionals.
Leave it to the professionals. We look this stuff up. We don't read Breitbart, so we actually stay informed. Ooh, shots fired. Okay. No burning questions today. Hello, everybody on Twitter. So now we're just going to chat. What's up, Dave?
Well, I was going to say, so speaking of initiatives, the 6 states in the Northeast that are banding together to get COVID testing and whatnot, they're actually kind of mimicking the plan for the GROW Act.
Are there?
Yeah, they are. So we're actually.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
we're actually seeing a field test of your idea
of
that somebody else independently had.
Right. What Dave brings up there is the GROW Act, the Gulf Region Omnibus Works Act, my primary legislation. You haven't seen it in written form. You've heard it teased. You're going to see it in written form very soon. The GROW Act enables a coalition of districts, especially in rural areas along the Gulf, which is where we are, of course. So that's what it's initially proposed. Some of the poorest and least well-funded districts in the country, even though most of the oil countries, excuse me, energy production comes through this area. So there's by definition, if you look at this region, there's a transfer of wealth that's skipping the working class. And, we're not picking on whoever does make money on oil. The point is the region should see benefits from it for the people: better infrastructure, better education, better healthcare. That's the principle of the GROW Act. And as Dave pointed out, on a short-term, goal-oriented mission for COVID testing, got a coalition of states working together to kind of bypass the federal government. And so that's gratifying to see. And of course, we know our theories, we didn't invent economic theory, just applying it to our region.
Nor insurance pools, for that matter.
Exactly.
That's how the insurance pools work.
Absolutely. Sharing costs, sharing risk. We do have a question from April. How do I feel about UBI, Universal Basic Income, as put forward by Andrew Yang? I love Andrew Yang. What many people don't know, and I'll tease it here, is the coalition of which I'm a part, the No Dem Left Behind coalition, which is, of course, at NDLB 2020 on Twitter. And I think their website is just ndlb.com. But I mean, Google it. No Dem Left Behind. It's in the name. At any rate, Andrew Yang is going to be hosting a town hall with us on August 27th, I believe. August 27th, 3 weeks from tomorrow. Which makes today the 5th, correct?
Yes.
Yes. See, I did know what day it was. I was just teasing earlier. Person, woman, man,
It's
camera,
awesome.
TV. He's going to be hosting a town hall with the No Dems Left Behind coalition, August 27th. Put it on your radar. I'll finally get to Zoom meet Andrew Yang. So I love his ideas. And his analysis of the very premise that a minimum amount of wealth shared, which when you do it economically like he does, he didn't get called, the buzzwords socialism, communist. But however, because at that minimum level, as Andrew Yang pointed out, you're talking about $1,000 a month was the proposed number to the poorest people in the United States, but to everybody. That just goes right back into the economy. That $1,000, if paid to a poor person, doesn't go into a mattress. It goes to groceries. It goes to paying utilities. It goes to paying landlords, which are just business owners who buy rental properties. Middle class folks for the most part. So it helps them pay their mortgage. This money goes into the economy and makes our money work for us. Once somebody gets shoved out of the system, like it becomes homeless, it's very hard to get back in. The cycle of poverty is such that, we've seen it over and over. Somebody who's just barely hanging on and then loses their place to live, and therefore their mail falls behind, and maybe they're on disability, and those checks fall behind, and then it's hard to crawl back out. So it does kind of create a minimum decent level to cover a lot of the problems in the U.S. Just that little bit of basic income allows people to get by and then thrive from there to reach for the American dream, as the goal is. April added, I heard him on the In the Bubble podcast with Andy Slavitt today. He was talking about UBI, COVID. Great ideas. He's a very smart man, as I said. Yeah, big fan. I didn't vote for him in the primary. But he had already dropped out by then. I voted for Joe Biden, as did most of the United States. 93% of Louisiana, I think, voted for Biden. So, it's pretty pro Biden state.
Biden
Sanders got 7.
Biden actually got more primary votes for the Dems than Trump got in the
Exactly
in the state of Louisiana.
which a lot of people argue means that Republicans didn't show up because, they knew who their nominee was. But that argument doesn't hold true when we already knew who our nominee was, too.
Exactly.
Because of COVID, our primaries were pushed back. Joe Biden had already reached the number of delegates needed to win the Democratic primary before he even got here. So that argument, that's my rebuttal to that. When people say, well, everybody knew Trump was going to be the nominee, why bother to go show up in polls? And COVID, we were scared of getting COVID. That's why you don't wear masks. Anyway, let's not attack that right now. But yeah, more people showed up to vote for Biden in Louisiana than did to show up to vote for Trump. What do you got?
I got a new question in.
All right.
So the question from Dimitri is 44% of Americans use Facebook as their primary news source.
And that's part of the problem.
Agree. But Facebook isn't held to the same journalistic standards. Well, no kidding. I mean, anyone can make a meme. Memes are the things that go viral. Nobody actually clicks on the articles, so...
Anybody people read headlines. Facebook is a large part of the problem.
Wait. That wasn't the question.
Oh, I was like a motor running. I'm ready to go. Go ahead.
Settle down, Trebek.
Oh, that was just the exposition.
Right, that was the exposition.
Okay.
Isn't it time to reimagine journalism in the digital age, and what are some of your ideas to address this with legislation?
Awesome. Well, there was this thing called the Fairness Doctrine. People have heard of it. We had it until 1987. That was a Reagan era / thank you, Ronnie. So the Fairness Doctrine was legislation we already had, which protected equal time, essentially, by journalistic news standards, which have since disintegrated, but we can also blame Bill Clinton and the 1996 Telecommunications Act for the ownership of Fox, foreign ownership. So there's a few things. Well, the first thing we can do about social media is react intelligently and therefore act and apply some form of standards proactively instead of retroactively. Mark Zuckerberg has already shown that unless you hold his feet to the fire, he's not going to change his business model because he makes billions and billions of dollars doing it. And, as a corporate owner, his responsibility is to make as much money as he can for his stockholders. And that's the way it is. If you're jammed into a capitalistic system, which we are, and we embrace fully. However, what we don't embrace and should are regulations. Regulations, for those who think of them as some sort of government overreach, regulations are paid for in blood. As a former union member, I can tell you. Regulations, they don't just slap, rules that corporations have to follow just for shits and giggles, pardon my language. Most regulations, such as we know, seatbelts, come about because people die if there is no compliance. Safety systems only work if you utilize them. So when it comes to journalistic standards, and we have seen reports of, and it's unproven, but I think time will bear out, that the intelligence agencies were correct and there was interference in the 2016 election and potential interference in the 2020 election happening right now. There are reports of that. We need to regulate, especially as it comes to political speech. We cannot, our president sets a terrible example because he's one of the worst offenders of the many people are saying attribution, or I've heard people say, and then you could say anything you want after that because all you have to claim is that one crazy person somewhere said it and it's true. And all you're doing is repeating hearsay. That's how Alex Jones made a living. Crazy theories many people are saying. Well, it doesn't make it true. And we need our social media platforms, which are unprecedented power wielded in the modern age. Dave and I were discussing earlier. There's a local radio, and I'm not going to mention them right now. Some people from a local radio station came to talk to us about running campaign ads, which we will be doing, by the way. And the reason being, their reach is around 5,000 people a day, was their estimation. When they're selling ad time, obviously more peak drive times, and they have a schedule of payments, but the thing that struck me that Dave and I talked about was my own reach is anywhere between 100,000 and 1 million people per day right now, via Twitter and Facebook. Our outreach is enormous, and so when I thought about 5,000 people a day and I have to pay X amount, and it's not a lot. I mean, support your local business. That's the main reason we're using the local radios, because the people who are just listening to the game when the Saints games will be running, they're going to be running on the radio, or just listening to the game, or just listening to one of their favorite talk show folks, just while they're tinkering in the garage. It's very American, and it's a way to reach people who aren't on Twitter or Facebook. Not everybody is. However, larger and larger numbers are, and we have that organically. So it's just kind of cool to think about media reach these days. But you want to reach every last person, which also leads us to don't let me forget to talk about the post office.
Okay.
We're definitely going to bring that up, because mailers are the old standby of political campaigns. All those damn mailers. Yes, sir.
Don't forget to talk about the post office.
Okay, I'll remember to talk about the post office. The mailers, and I don't know about you, but every time I ever got a mailer, I'd look at it, look at the candidate, if I already knew who they were, and if I was going to vote for them or against them. Because as soon as any race, local sheriff, constable, state senate, anyone, I kind of look at the candidates, see who I like, check them out, and then forget about it, because like I had a life before politics. Now I don't have a life. Now it's politics. But I'll wear the bullseye for y'all. But the point being, I never liked political mailers, receiving them myself. I'd see it, and and it's like, what a waste of paper. So there's a reason that in 2020 we don't really use mailers anymore. Now that we do and will be. And by the way, if anybody wants to volunteer, you can sign up on our website, which is robandersonforcongress.com. There's a section for volunteers. Sign up, because we will be doing postcard writing campaigns, which are actual individual notes handwritten by volunteers who send them out to, potential voters in district to share the word. Hey, you may not have Facebook or Twitter, or read The Advocate, or, read Raw Story, or how many news things have we been on? I don't even know. NOLA.com. People talk about politics once the campaigns really get hot and heavy, which qualifying just ended. But they do have a mailbox, and they'll go out and they'll say, "Oh, Rob Anderson, hadn't heard about him running around against that terrible fella Clay Higgins." Yes, I am. That's me. So postcard campaigns. That leads me to the post office, which right now is actively being undermined by a Trump sycophant billionaire donor again. Betsy DeVos is now running the post office. Might as well say that. I don't even know the guy's name.
Louis DeJoy, Postmaster General.
Is the Postmaster General, which is an atrocity. And reports are coming out that he's intentionally slowing and suppressing the mail, denying overtime, cutting costs, and therefore mail is not getting out on time, and prioritizing Amazon. I read
He's got stock in UPS.
Oh,
Yeah.
imagine that.
He's also
and FedEx, I think.
He's also.
It's unbelievable. The corruption is right here in the open, and they're trying. The whole purpose is an institution, an American institution, that's actually mentioned in the Constitution of the United States, is being attacked
and predates it,
and being attacked and undermined by this administration actively in real time, and people are not going bananas. A lot of us like to complain about the mail service. I know it's part of the pop culture, joking about it. Nevertheless, the post office's reliability is something like 99.9%. I forget what their numbers are, but over time,
that's accurate.
Because it's protected by federal law. Anytime you send something in the mail, 99.9% of the time it gets there, and in a timely fashion. We take it so for granted that now we're saying, oh, it can be better. Well, of course it can be. Anything can be improved. Progress is always good, but taking it away is not progress. It isn't. We must protect the United States Postal Service. We must defend it against these attacks, whether from outside or from within. So that's my 2 cents on the United States Postal Service. Yes, sir.
All right, I've got 2 new questions. One from Nick Bizio, who comments there's gridlock in Congress currently over the second round of COVID relief.
Yeah, there is.
And assistance and whatnot, and kind of points out there's really no bipartisan solutions that have been recommended so far. What would you do as a congressman? Like, what would you propose to help the U.S. public?
What I would propose as a potential congressman is that everybody goes out on November 3rd and votes out every GOP incumbent there is and elect Democrats. The reason there's a gridlock, and it is actually biting us as American citizens right now with unemployment running out, is Mitch McConnell blocking the Senate from passing anything that could be favorable to the Democrats, period. That's the story. I wish it were more complex. It is not. Mitch McConnell is blocking legislation at the cost of actually killing his own constituents. He is stonewalling any and all legislation that comes to his desk from the House. The House passed the HEROES Act back in May. Mitch McConnell hasn't passed it. So as a congressman, I would have voted for the HEROES Act, and I'd be sitting there right now in D.C. or here in district, depending on where's Clay these days. Is he still hiding in D.C.? Or is he back here campaigning?
To my knowledge, he's still in D.C.
He's probably still in D.C.
That said, I'm going to hold you to the question because you didn't technically answer it. What would you propose as?
I'd be speaking out like I do now, but I'd have a bigger platform. I would be trying to get this legislation through. And once the House passes it, their part is done, but they still have a voice. And they can still say, hey, the reason it's not passing is not us. We passed this. It's sitting in the Senate, who then went on vacation rather than pass it. This is what happened. This is what's happening right now. And they're blaming us when they added, 1.7 for the FBI building, 682 million, I think. It was around 700 million for the F-35. That needs more money dumped into it right now. None of these are,
That was recent?
That was part of the Senate's answer.
Oh my God, I didn't even know that.
And I think it was 370 or 270 million for remodeling. I mean, this is what's happening. Just look, and the Republicans say the Democrats say, "Hey, we passed a bill, and unemployment extension and more, TPP money for or PPP for the small business, for the small business loans." And the Republicans said, "Well, let's not forget the poor, starved F-35 program, which needs another 700 million right now during a pandemic." I mean, I'm trying not to curse, but it's like that's what I'd be doing. What I'm doing now, but louder so that y'all know what's actually happening. So, Democrats get a lot of blame, and far be it from me to defend the DNC. I'm not running anybody else's race. I'm running mine. As a Democrat, I would be speaking out about anybody who's holding up any legislation that helps the people of the country, period. All right. Now I'm getting all worked up now, so let me pick. Blah 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 blah. The U.S. Postal Service isn't a business; it shouldn't be treated exactly. It's a service. It's a public. I mean, hell, it's a right. It's a way for us to communicate each other. It predates the internet, but people still send stuff through the mail. I mean, that's how Amazon does its business. It moves stuff from one place to the other via the mail. So it's nonsense to even attack the U.S. Postal Service. There's no reason that Trump is doing this except political, because he thinks that if everybody in the country votes, he loses huge, because that's what will happen. That's why the post office is being attacked. $8 billion for military weapons and 1.75. Thank you, Dimitri. It was an absurd package. I mean, it just wasn't even close to reality. And COVID tracing, and don't worry about that. We got to have this. It's like, come on. That's what's happening right now. So as a Democrat, I'd be doing what I'm doing now. I would have even bigger audience, which would be rock and roll.
I would like to point out,
yes,
that between those two sums, the $8 billion for military weapons and the $1.75 billion for a new FBI building, those two together equal the sum total that the feds were going to give as discretionary spending for the state governments to react to COVID. The sum total.
Right, they're throwing a bone, for all these states, which are now going to be heavily, their budgets are going to be all whacked. I don't know if you've heard about that. We, here in Louisiana, of course, we had the Bobby Jindal days, which by spending all kinds of discretionary monies and setting up all these set-asides absolutely destroyed the Louisiana budget. Even Republicans will admit Bobby Jindal was not good for Louisiana. So when John Bell Edwards took office in 2015, he inherited a very bad budget deficit. I think it was $1 billion at its worst when they were.
Not quite. It was like 900 million.
900 million. What's 100 million between friends, really?
Accuracy.
Accuracy. Anyway, and by his reelection in 2019, and by that time he had balanced the budget, and Medicaid had added Medicaid expansion, which helped balance the budget and covered 500,000 new Louisianan on health insurance. So it was an amazing turnaround in 4 years, and the Republicans still hate John Bell because he's a Democrat. We hate him. Whatever. He's doing a great job. Why did I do this shout out for John Bell? What was the topic? I got so worked up I forgot what I was talking about. John Bell.
I don't know. You kind of like segued.
Yeah. And so we're running into these. Now we have a balanced budget, was my point. I'm sorry, I got off topic.
Yes.
Now we have a balanced budget. And because COVID hit, now we're facing, like many states, I think it was Missouri is looking at a $700 million deficit. Maybe incorrect, but I've been reading about states today who are now looking at their budgets, for next year, because that's part of what in government you have to administrate. You have to, deal with all this revenue and expenditures. That's what states do. And I don't even know what ours is going to be, but all these states are going to need relief, or they're going to have to raise taxes unilaterally so that on a state level we're paying for what the federal government didn't do. And that's not talked about yet, because the next time the governors run, their opponents are going to hang that on them. He had $1 billion deficit. Well, yeah, we had a pandemic. It made the news. I don't know if you know. So, yeah, that's going to be a whole separate issue, but that's on a state level, and thank goodness I'm running for a federal job. So next, GMQ. Hey, GMQ. Question from Lucia. What can be done about stopping corporations from outsourcing? That's a good question. My sister just got laid off due to outsourcing. Well, first of all, that sucks. And sorry to hear, and that is a problem. Now, I would do a little Joe Biden shout out here today. Because I just saw a new ad from Joe Biden, the campaign ad, where he's driving a vintage Vet in his driveway, I guess. Have you seen it? Pretty cool ad, actually. And he was talking about it, American cars, and he's talking about the next wave of innovation. Due to all these global treaties, labor costs being what they are, most stuff is not made in the U.S. anymore like it used to be. When we were, when they talk about make America great again, it means back to when we didn't have a global economy because everybody was recovering from World War II, and all our boomers came back from war, and we started making stuff, and America took over as a manufacturing giant in the 50s. But that was before the Civil Rights Act, and most women are expected to stay home and make babies. So when you're talking about being nostalgic for that time, you have to realize it wasn't a level playing field. Fast forward to now, and a lot of things are made overseas. Even call centers now, as we know, as famously commented, a lot of them went to India and other countries. Malaysia has stepped up over there because their labor costs, the dollar translates, where they get maybe paid slave labor wages. Here, they'd make $1 a day, and we can't compete with that, especially if you pay people a living wage here. And they blame, I don't know who, but they blame the worker, and they send jobs overseas. And we do lead the world in some industries, and we have to concentrate it. I think going forward, back to the Joe Biden ad, he was talking about a way that America could continue to innovate and be a world leader in manufacturing again is to focus on electric cars, the next generation. He's talking about thinking about a vintage Mustang, and he was showing the old style with the everything, Detroit steel. Imagine that being an electric car and that being the next phase going forward. And if we really made a push for that, and that's where I think when you're talking about what can we do about outsourcing is let's lead in what we do lead in, which is like the entertainment industry, software. We're still a huge software producing country. We still have a lot of agricultural products that we can feed the world because we're so good at farming here. A lot of that has to do with immigration, which is a good thing. So yeah, we need to push on industries that are viable going forward, and let's invest in those and train people for those. And we can, instead of talking about bringing back jobs that have been outsourced now, creating new industries and move forward, leading in those, I think is more viable, is my opinion. Hey, John Ailes, yo, Rob Mob. Tell us about progressive media and how we can get people to be more curious about news and truth. That's a damn good question. Where do you watch news outside of the mainstream? Love from Los Angeles. All right, that's my friend John Ailes. Shout out, of course, as the great character actor. I'm not going to run his resume, but look him up. He's on IMDb. Tell us about progressive media and how we can get people to be more curious about news and truth. All I can push for that is what we're already doing and trying to continue doing and will keep doing, which is always encourage people to source and fact check. Don't just believe the first news source you come across. And that's either left or right, because a lot of times progressives share bad memes too. Facebook is a source of disinformation for everybody. Somebody makes a meme out of it, it must be true. You can write a meme making fun of Trump saying anything, and you share it on Facebook and people think of it as factual. It isn't. What I have to do, and have gotten in the habit of doing over the last 10 years or so, since the rise of Facebook, coincidentally, is to always multiple source. When I hear a story, I check multiple sources that aren't necessarily, like not all from the New York Times or not all from the Washington Post. If I see a journalist talk about something, I go look for verification across multiple, and I know that's more time consuming, but that way I'm fairly sure every time I do a post or a tweet or a comment that it's based on fact. I do not repeat rumor. I do not encourage rumor. Always, if anybody is saying, I'd like at least two sources before I, will repeat something. And that's how I do it. And I think we have to be vigilant. We have to be, we have to put in the work. Unfortunately, we don't have the days where Walter Cronkite would tell us what was going on and we believed him. Those days are gone. The last three great anchor phase altogether, which was in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up. Dan Rather, Peter Jennings, and Tom Brokaw were the big three anchors for ABC, NBC, and CBS. And that was kind of the end of the heyday of the anchors. And then Brian Williams turned out to lie about some of Iraqi attacks. So, news anchors don't have the credibility they did. Growing up, I think we watched Peter Jennings mostly in my house, but we also watched Rather and Brokaw. And there was a sense that those were telling you the truth. They were just reporting news. Somewhere after that, it just became more about opinion. When you're watching Sean Hannity to pick on somebody or Tucker Carlson, you're getting a lot of opinion. It's not news reporting like there used to be. So I have to multi-source everything. That's how I do it. And where do I watch news outside of the mainstream? Well, we're on Twitter, man. I see all the journalists. I read a lot of information in a day to stay informed. It's a full-time job just keeping up with the information because I can't read a single source. I read it, then I'll check it somewhere else, and go, okay, now I can say that. I hope that answers your question, John. Okay, KCS, Clay Higgins is holding up construction on the I-10 bridge over Lake Charles. Yeah, because politically he's tied to Trump, and that's why. He needs to get federal matching funds. The state has already set aside their portion of that bridge. If you follow the news, the state government is written, and Clay Higgins tried to blame the state government or somebody. The last he was trying to blame John Bell last, and they were like, "No, we have this $500 million set aside in the budget right now for the bridge. You bring the federal matching funds, we have a new bridge." But they're trying to tie it into political success. Trump promised a new bridge if he was reelected. So that's the holdup on that. It needs federal matching funds. Our GROW Act incorporates that. Most politicians promise things. I will tell you, if I get elected, that bridge is going to be, it's going to be replaced and quickly, because it's just, it's just a job. I mean, it's just a job. I mean, why don't you do it, Clay? Stop the partisan crap. Just get the bridge replaced and stop posing on it. Okay, hold on. You can in a second. Just reading. John says, thanks, Rob. I believe this is an important issue for our young people. It really is. Curiosity is critical. Absolutely. Always check. Never believe. Even me. I verify my sources as much as possible, but I've been wrong. I've been wrong before. The only difference is I'll tell you when I'm wrong, and I'll apologize, and I'll say, here's what's happened, and here's how I came to that conclusion. But I try not to be wrong. It makes it easier. Go on, Dave.
So to extend that point of fixing the I-10 bridge, I mean, you have a 33% downturn in the GDP over the course of the COVID thing. It's the worst
in the last month. Yeah,
it's the worst in U.S. history.
Worse than the Great Depression.
Yeah, by a significant margin.
Yeah.
So the easy solution to that is that, well, I say easy, that's kind of putting it a little loosely, but whenever you have a downturn in the economy, if you inject federal resources specifically into things like, I don't know, fixing infrastructure, which is something every politician's always actually
didn't Franklin Delano Roosevelt kind of do something like that?
He's the only person who's ever actually done it, and it
was in the Great Depression, and then we got like the Tennessee Valley Authority, and
exactly,
I know,
brought us from the Great Depression into discouraging 40s and 50s.
Right now, the federal government has run up, I think, $8 trillion in debt under Trump, the greatest tax increase in human history. It's been calculated when you add in the interest rates that we're going to have to go up from the amount of debt he's taken on in 3.5 years. It's unbelievable how quickly he has killed our credit. Nevertheless, any spending the federal government does is based on the fact that the United States is a great producer of wealth, as we know. Being 20 whatever trillion in debt now doesn't mean that we can't spend anything until we raise $20 trillion. It's not like individual, budgets. If you were negative 20 trillion on your bank account, the bank wouldn't let you write another check. On the other hand, if your country was worth hundreds of trillions like the U.S. is, that's where we do our spending. So all this going on, and all that shortfall is going to, I mean, I don't even know what our there's a difference between debt and budget deficit. I don't even know what our budget is projected to be next year. Nobody has a clue. With COVID, that it's, I mean, we were a little over $1 trillion in a deficit on the last budget before this started. So the budget deficit, which means the amount we're going to raise from taxes and the amount we're going to have up with programs next year is going to be some ridiculous number. We already know more than $1 trillion in deficit, probably. Republican Party always tries to do is, well, we need to cut spending. Well, you can't cut $1 trillion in spending from the budget without like dismantling the military or dismantling Medicare and Social Security, which is the usual goals. They'd rather take it away from the people who paid in their entire lives than to take away from their fear mongering. So we're going to be in a huge deficit next year. Nevertheless, injecting that money, much like Andrew Yang's UBI, injecting that money back into the economy in the form of rural Wi-Fi in every district in the United States, roads, better hospitals and better schools, actually investing it back into the country then doesn't need just reinvest it. And that wealth has become part of what the United States is now worth. We're now moving into the 21st century. Anybody who's ever been to Europe or Dubai or like Singapore or Beijing these days realize the United States is not leading the world in infrastructure anymore. I know we hate to hear that we're not number one, but we're really not. If you ever visit Germany like I did, and I went to a train station changing trains a few years back, and it was cleaner than like the hospitals in the United States. This train station with like 4 different recycling bins, and it's unbelievable how far we are behind on infrastructure. Our country is lagging. Yes.
Speaking of investing money to make money, which is a no-brainer for most people,
right.
It leads to a question that was skipped by April.
I see. Can you talk about I'm sorry, not to cut you off.
That's okay.
Can you talk about diversifying economies into sustainable jobs like solar, hydroelectric, etc., ahead of when fossil fuels start to run out? Yes, one of the major portions of our platform is the GROW Act, as we've talked about, and a big factor in that is bringing, not attacking, to be clear, the oil and gas industry in Louisiana, which is a large part of our jobs and our infrastructure and our inherent wealth, is our resources. Oil and gas being one part of. We also have a huge lumber industry. We also grow a lot of rice. These are parts of Louisiana's wealth that belong to its people. And oil and gas will someday run out. Estimates vary as to when, but someday it will. We know that it, without new drilling platforms, and even without new drilling, it's going to run out here, and maybe we discover it somewhere else. That doesn't affect the people of Louisiana. So what we want is, one, it's better for the environment and hydrocarbons in the air to go towards green energy. Just makes sense. So it makes sense that an energy producing state such as ours should invest in and focus on more green energy solutions here in Louisiana. And there's several primary reasons. One, it makes the environment better, but two, it means new jobs. It means new investment into the state. People think of, solar like you're going to have to suffer. With the right incentive packages, there's $8 billion worth of jobs waiting just in solar alone, and hydroelectric and wave generators that Dave and I have been trying to look into to see if it's viable in our offshore regions. Nevertheless, all these green energy means new investment and cleaner air. It's like a no-brainer. Better jobs, and then what we'd want to do to incentivize is having those job training programs so people aren't employed. We don't shut down the economy and then 2 years later people start getting new jobs. People can't wait around for that. They're going to move to where the work is. And we already have a brain drain problem when you're talking about four-year universities. We need to keep our workers. Start having paid training programs, switching them from the oil and gas platforms and the, all that sort of thing into new industry. And a lot of those industries are cyclical. 6 months you'll work and then you get laid off for 6 months. I know, I did it. I mean, that's, I've been in that field. Paid training into, say, solar installations, for example, and massive in-push of new solar jobs and technology in Louisiana. Our air gets cleaner, and we're a new tech industry moving into the 21st century. It's no brainer.
All right, so I've got a couple other questions that came in.
Yep, and then we're going to shut it down. We actually had a full show today.
Wow, yeah, it's already 7:48.
Yeah. Sometimes I just get started and can't stop.
Okay, so if you had to, and this is by the way from Nick Vizio,
Hey, Nick.
you had to figure out national standards of conduct for officers, and I'm assuming he's talking about police officers here,
Right.
and ending of qualified immunity, what would you do?
Well, I do think that we absolutely have to take a look at, and I know a lot of people have very extreme positions on this, but my main push when you're talking about law enforcement is independent oversight, preferably civilian oversight. Complete independent oversight is the key. And to me, like anything, as we just talked about with solar and alternative energies, is training. It has been shown more training equals better police officers. Mm-hmm. Now, having talked to actual police officers in district, and many of them, a lot of the problem stemming in Louisiana is we don't pay police officers living wages, really. We pay them very little, so we're not necessarily getting highly trained, highly respectful and motivated people. You get people who probably shouldn't be in that line of work. So if we actually train police officers, there's a lot of European countries do 2 years of schooling to become a police officer, and then of course there are higher expectations. And like anything, who watches the watchers? I don't remember the Latin for it right now, but it's from the Watchmen.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, but there has to be independent oversight, because if you commit a crime while doing your job in most fields, you're going to go to jail. And a lot of police forces, it seems, the people who have done these horrible acts, which are now being captured because we have more cameras, then there should be accountability. Absolutely. And I think that's it. I'm pretty tired now. Was there another question? Or was that it?
I have a concern from Twitter.
Okay.
Bethany is a little bit perturbed at you. She said, I saw you like a tweet earlier that referred to Africa by Toto as the worst song ever. Twitter boyfriend status in jeopardy. So I think you have some answering to do.
I got some explaining to do. I have a lot of followers who say goofy things like, Africa is the worst song by Toto ever. And then, I may like their comment, but that just means I read it. Does not mean I agree. Retweets do not mean endorsements. As they seem to add, everybody adds that to their profile like it's a legal qualifier. I get questioned every time I like anything. I read the feed so fast. Sometimes I'll hit like on a, God forbid, a Trump tweet.
Yeah,
and it's like, I did not mean to hit like. I'm sorry. I am not a traitor to the cause. I get people DM me and they're, how could you like it? And I was like, oh, it's an accident. Boom, undo. I read a lot of information and I apologize.
What is your feeling about Africa by Toto?
Oh, it's a great song, actually.
Well, there you go, Bethany.
There you go.
Just for the record, the music video for Africa by Toto is terrible.
One of my Twitter followers, here's a bit of trivia for you, is Rosanna Arquette. We follow each other. And yes, quis custodiet ipsos custodios. Rosanna Arquette, for whom the song, the Toto song, Rosanna.
Oh, that was
written about her.
I
didn't know that.
The name, anyway. I think she was the girlfriend of one of the people in the band at the time, and she was in the video. I mean, anyway.
So you might want to explain what.
that means who watches the watchers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Yes.
That's my sister. She's a sharp one. Okay. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. Much fun. I think we covered a lot of topics today. I ranted and raved and hopefully didn't offend too many people. Vote for me. We're going to do some shout outs here. My website is robandersonforcongress.com. We are running a grassroots campaign, which means we don't take corporate PAC money. If you can donate, please do. The Act Blue link is there. Rob Anderson 2018 on Twitter, because I did run for Congress in 2018. Got verified and what?
Demetra Jones doesn't know who Toto is.
She doesn't know who Toto is. Who is Toto? It's a band from the 80s.
Oh.
Check it out on YouTube after this ends.
That was very funny. Sorry.
Yeah, y'all were laughing and it hadn't popped up on my feed yet. Rob Anderson 2018. And obviously on Facebook, it's Rob Anderson for Louisiana. Go ahead.
I do have one thing to plug real quick.
Sure.
So the state of Louisiana is going to be doing a voter purge after the municipal general election on August 15th, which is coming up in 2 weeks. There is a site that you can go to on the Secretary of State's website where you can check to see whether you are still active or inactive.
And make sure you're still active.
Polls. Yeah, if you are active, then you type your name and nothing comes up.
Right.
Which is a good thing.
Yes.
If you're inactive, it will say so, and you need to make sure you're actively registered at that point, because if you show up November 3rd and you got purged, then you don't get to vote. So it's really important that the next 2 or 3 weeks you check to see that your voter registration is still actually current. That's all I got.
Stretching out. Thank you all. Is that it? Good night. See you next week. Don't forget Andrew Yang, the 27th, and I think No Dems Left Behind is playing some other stuff here and there. We're working on it. Everybody, thank you all. You got to end that one.
Oh, yeah.